We're not always going to agree and we're not always going to be on the same page, but being able to engage in those conversations consistently in a productive way that allows us to move forward was really a catalyst for us. I'm so proud of the team. They created a Jeopardy game. So they took our values and our behaviors and they took real life AFSC scenarios and situations that have happened in our organization and they mapped them out to the answer is always a value or a behavior. And then they've got the scenario that they can talk through.
Welcome to Strategy and Culture Conversations, a podcast that explores the role of strategy, culture, and transformation in building thriving organizations. I'm your host, Trina McCarroll, and I'm glad that you've joined us today as part of our communities of courageous leaders from across Alberta. In each show, we'll share our success stories and lessons learned as we create thriving, high-performing organizations and shape the future of work in our province. Let's dig in. So thank you so much for joining me, Melanie. I really appreciate the time that you've had giving us today to join us and have a really great discussion about organizational culture, organizational strategy, the interplay between the two, and how people are really at the heart of all that organizations do. So if you could kind of give us an introduction for yourself and your role with AFSC.
Thanks, Trina, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate today. I was super excited when you reached out. This is a piece of work that I am personally super proud of. I've worked with the organization for quite a while, and I was on the business side, so not the HR side to begin with when I started out my career. But I was really brought in to the concepts and the purpose and the drive that AFSC has and the impact that they have on the agriculture industry. And so it became really important for me to understand and make sure that it was clear for everybody that worked here. Here's why we exist. Here's what we're doing, and here's how we're doing it. And so that's kind of the ethos of how this started. So I'm the Chief People Officer for AFSC, which is Agriculture Financial Services Corporation. We just shortened it to the 4 letters of AFSC. We're a crown corporation out of the province of Alberta. We provide Alberta's farmers and agribusinesses with loans, crop insurance, and farm income stabilization. We've been partners in the ag industry for over 80 years, and we're working alongside producers to build a strong, growing, and diverse industry. So we have a number of team members that are extremely passionate about the industry. They either are producers themselves, and they also work within our organization, or they just have a passion overall for agriculture. I was laughing when you were talking about purpose, because our purpose is working together, we grow and sustain the agriculture industry in Alberta, and that's why we exist. That's why we're here. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of perspective of who I am and our organization.
Yes, exactly. And so you came from the business side, not from the HR side.
No.
And then you can kind of bring that expertise of serving the clients directly and really what your company does on a day-to-day basis into HR.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you. So a few years ago, I recall that your executive team really wanted to fully develop your values that you wanted to. So can you tell us a little bit about what kind of led to that, wanting to really develop your values and what they mean to the organization?
For sure. So it would have been around February of 2023 when we actually started the work, but I'm going to go back about 6 months before that. Our CEO, Daryl Kay, he had been in his role for about 2.5 years. And he'd spent a lot of time focusing on the development of our strategy. So really developing our purpose statement, defining why we exist in the industry, why our organization is here, and then worked really hard to make a really clear direction from a strategic perspective. But what was missing was the how we work together. How do we accomplish that together? So we started talking about that in the fall of 2023. We developed a bit of a plan of, I think this is the right time to really adjust our culture to create something that team members can really grab a hold of, because we did spend lots of time figuring out what we're doing. And now it was time to really talk about how we can accomplish that together. So in February, we engaged with them and said, could you really help us develop a bit of a framework of how we can look at our culture a little bit differently and how we can develop a better set of values? Because our values up until that point were pretty generic. They were accountability, respect, trust, integrity, and excellence. And if you Google many organizations, that will be their values. And then, each organization tries to define what that means for them. And so that's exactly what we did. We had those values for 8 years, and they just were not resonating with our team members. And we had been collecting data from our team members for a few years prior to us having this discussion around culture. And what we were finding was what we believed our culture was and the values and behaviors that were being exhibited were very different from what was written on our pieces of paper. And so we took that data and we brought it into this workshop with our executive leadership team. And why it was important for us to gather the voice of our team members and to really learn what their lived experience was, it forced the executive team to anchor themselves in reality. So every time we found ourselves saying, well, no, this is what it's like, we would go back to the data that we've been collecting from our team members to really make sure, is that what it was like? And oftentimes it wasn't. So our perception of what our culture was or how we felt teams were interacting was very different than what was actually taking place. So being able to use that data was extremely important. Through that workshop, we developed our values. We have 3 values, so we wanted to keep it as simple as possible. We have 3 values. Each value has a dynamic statement so that it's memorable. And then we have 5 behaviors that stack on top of each other for each of those values. They build upon one another. And if we're doing those behaviors well, we know that that value will be lived and you'll be able to see it, you'll be able to hear it, and you'll be able to experience it. And that was key for us. So we did that work in February of 2023. Then we rolled it out to the senior leadership group. So the next kind of layer down to see, did it resonate with them? And our 3 values were people are our foundation. We're successful because of our team members. Clients are our focus. And excellence is our aspiration. And so it's those 3 values with a series of behaviors that we rolled out to our senior leadership group. It did resonate with them. It matched up to our data. We then did a series of focus groups throughout the fall of 2023, where we met with every single leader, number of individual contributors, and spent a lot of time talking about the value statements, the behaviors. Did they resonate with team members? Where did they think we were going to struggle the most? Which behaviors did we feel were going to be the easiest to adopt? And we spent about 4 months doing those focus groups. We refined our wording a little bit here and there, just so that, again, it really resonated with our team members. And then finally, in February of 2024, we had a town hall, and Daryl was able to roll out the values and the behaviors framework. I should say in January, before the town hall, we had a full day leadership workshop where we brought every leader in person, and we spent a couple of days just going through the values, the behaviors, different exercises, just to get leadership really comfortable with the values and the behaviors themselves before we introduced it to their teams, and their team started asking questions, because leadership is a cornerstone to having a good culture. It's the most important relationship that a team member is going to have in the workplace. And so making sure that our leaders had consistent messaging, they understood the values, they understood the behaviors, all of that was key to us, just to make sure that it was going to be successful once we did roll it out, and that we would be able to address any questions that team members had. So that got us to the rollout stage, and we've been in a year of sustainment so far. So
that's really fantastic, and one of the most thorough examples that I've seen, and certainly a very similar process that I use with my clients in terms of, I really liked how you got that initial data from your employees and using their wording of how they describe working with each other, working with clients. And that's what makes I think vision, mission, values, and purpose statements specific to the organization rather than just generic. As you mentioned, everyone has integrity or respect on their walls, but what is the specific words and feelings and behaviors that are really unique to your organization? That's fantastic. That's great. And I also really appreciate the intentionality that Daryl took with your executive team of the linkage between, as values, the linkage between your culture and your strategy. And certainly in terms of how strategy gets lived out and implemented through your culture. And I think that is just incredible to witness the power of your culture. And so that's really great. That's awesome. And so you mentioned about your purpose statement. and love your purpose statement. Working together, we grow and sustain the agriculture industry in Alberta, and really about your values between your strategy. And I think that's the work that had been going up front, and then realizing that your culture is how you do that. Any commentary or thoughts on values, strategy, and the linkage between the two?
Yeah, so we usually have a pretty lofty strategy. So we've recently just shifted to a 5-year strategic planning cycle. And then we break that 5 years out into, so our strategic objectives are going to take us over the next 5 years, where we have defining statements of, so for example, our new one that we're just getting ready to roll out in April. By 2030, this is what AFSC will look like and how we know we will have been successful for each of those strategic objectives. And in that, we bring it back to our values. So if you look at our values and our behaviors, this is how we're going to accomplish where we want to be by 2030. And that is throughout the document. So they complement each other very well. And then, of course, our purpose statement is kind of that North Star. That's the piece of information that we look for that help us make sure that when we're talking about our strategic objectives, we're always going back to the purpose. Is this a good strategic objective for an organization that is trying to work together to grow and sustain the agriculture industry in Alberta? We're very Alberta proud. We don't work out. We've got sister organizations in other provinces that do similar work that we do, but our focus is Alberta agriculture, and making sure that our Alberta producers are taken care of. And that's really why we're here. So a lot of our strategic objectives are focused on that. That's why our values, people are our foundation, was the first value. And we were intentional with making sure that that was our first value in everything that we talk about. If we take care of our people, and we make sure that our people understand why we're here, they understand where we're going, and they have that sense of what it means to be part of something, they're going to turn around and provide that to our clients, which is what's our next value, which clients is our focus. And truly, really then just try and share that same experience that they're having internally with our producers and our clients. And then excellence, really, it was a build off of Daryl's common theme, since he has been our CEO, is easy to do business with. Because oftentimes being a crown corporation, you can sometimes struggle with being a little bit more bureaucratic or having more complicated processes than they need to be. So really adopting that continuous improvement mindset and really being easy to do business with. And that's why excellence is our aspiration, was the next value, with a series of behaviors that just help us achieve that strategic objective.
Mm-hmm.
And then our metrics, of course, are all kind of linked to that. So what are our key metrics of success? And it feeds into that link of our purpose, our strategic objectives, and our values are helping us achieve those through that. Yeah. And the metric lets us know if we're being successful or not.
Was it already part of your culture, or did you have to do culture change around, I'm not saying putting your employees before your clients. Maybe that's too strong of a way to word it.
That's fair, I think.
Really wanting to put that emphasis on your people, and then they do great work for your clients. Was that already in place? Or do you think you had to kind of come to that, bring your culture along to that?
That was a lengthy discussion, because our clients, for the last 8 years of those very generic values that we had, every document that we had, the client was always first. It was very client heavy, and it should be, because we're here because of our clients. If we don't have clients, there's no reason for us to exist. But we did lose sight of the importance of having an engaged, productive team that is serving those clients. And that's how we had to look at it. And so we did have a bit of a lengthy discussion. It wasn't this is a light bulb moment for us. It was, we want to take care of our people. We care about our people, but we needed to make sure that we explained it correctly to our organization and to our board. Because I know our board, which is made up of producers, they struggle with it a little bit. And so spending that time explaining to them why we wanted to put the emphasis on our people first, then our clients, and then our excellence. And it was all building upon, like, each value builds upon the next. And it allowed us to really be able to show a year in. We can show engagement has improved, culture has improved, our ability to strategically execute on the work that we had planned is better than it was before. And we truly believe it's because we're putting that emphasis on taking care of our team members, making sure they have a consistent experience, making sure that they report to solid leadership, that we're collecting their voice. We want to hear from them. They're part of this journey with us. And that's feeding down into how they interact with producers, which then also makes it easier internally to just be more streamlined, to really take that continuous improvement mindset and want to be easy to do business with. So it all builds upon each other.
Yes, I
but
love
it was
that.
A shift.
That's exactly what I wondered. Certainly, as a shift in the mindset of you want to do exceptional work for your clients, and a lot of organizations that I work with and that I support, it's probably like the 90% of the focus is on the client, and then the employees are a bit of an afterthought. And so I really try to encourage my clients to at least shift to like 50-50, and even more so of if you can think of your employees first, because that's who delivers the exceptional service to your clients. So I love that. And now you have the data to demonstrate that that's in fact true. And you can deliver a stronger experience by prioritizing your people first.
We work in a relationship-based industry. Agriculture is very strong on relationships. And so it's no different than you need team members who have good relationships to be able to build relationships with clients. And having that skill set is really quite important for us. And so having team members that have longer tenure, where we're creating an environment where they want to stay with us, they want to grow with us, they can see their career being developed throughout our organization, just makes that producer experience so much stronger.
Yes, of course. Yes, right. It makes so much sense when the stronger your ability to build relationships, have difficult conversations, support one another through good times and in tough times. All of that translates from coworker experience as well as to client and lender experience. So yeah, that's great. That's really great. So what are some of the ways that you think your values play like really practical role in the day-to-day organizational culture?
So I think something that we immediately started to see, so I'm just going to focus on the people one initially. So we've got the people value, which is people are our foundation. We are successful because of our team members. Then we have 5 behavior statements, and it's a supporting chain that each of those behavior statements builds upon. So the initial behavior is focusing on creating an environment where all team members can feel like there is a space for them and they can be themselves. That's that first behavior. And then this sets the foundation for acting with and assuming positive intent, which is the second behavior, which fosters mutual trust. And then with this trust in place, we can communicate both courageously and respectfully. And then such open communication enhances collaboration and empowers team members to make decisions. And ultimately, this sequence is that nurturing that well-being and growth for our entire team. So that kind of lays out the 5 behavior statements. And what we've seen when we started rolling out this framework, we heard language change for team members. So it almost gave them the opportunity to use the behavior statements and the words that we were using to engage in those difficult or challenging conversations. So having courageous and respectful conversations, what we heard team members start to say was, I just need to have a conversation with you, and I'm going to need to be courageous when I have it. And immediately by using that word, it did a couple of things. It set the stage for the other person to say, yes, I feel like I'm ready to have this conversation, and I'm not going to be defensive about it. Or it gave that other team member permission to say, I don't think I'm in the right headspace to have this conversation today, but can we circle back to it tomorrow to where I'm able to be more open? And we just seen a change in how team members started communicating. We're not always going to get along. We're not always going to have the same point of view. That's the whole point of having diverse backgrounds at the table, having diverse thought. But it's how do we accept that? How do we listen to what's actually being said? How do we take it and make that AFSC best decision, not an individual team member best decision? So that was one practical experience that we've seen for sure really take hold. The other one was positive intent around that value. What that allowed to stop doing was we would have team members who would just automatically be assuming that it wasn't positive intent. And there would be a lot of potential gossiping that was taking place, or just this frustrating circle conversations that weren't really productive. By having that behavior, What that allowed us to do from a leadership perspective is leaders now say, let's just assume positive intent. Let's assume that this is all positive. We're trying to make the best decision for AFSC. And that then allowed that individual to take that step back and say, okay, if I'm assuming positive intent, now let's have a bit of a different conversation. Let's work towards a solution together and not assume that you're doing something to me or that you meant to do something that wasn't intended. So it's just, again, it's using the words to really help us have those challenging conversations in a more productive and professional and respectful way.
Yes. And setting the expectation that around here, the way that we do things is we assume positive intent.
Yes.
And so then it's putting a common expectation of we don't do things like gossip and we don't do things like talking poorly about one another. That's not acceptable. This is what is acceptable is, say, talking directly to one another and being curious and exploring why you said that or the tone that it came out in. So I think that's the shared vocabulary is a huge benefit. That's fantastic. Cool.
And
any other examples? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we're actually finding it's even working with the producers too, because we have on our clients are our focus. One of the behaviors we'll work with our clients through multiple channels. And that did a couple of things for our team members. Our team members sometimes were struggling with the pace that we were moving to a digital platform. And they felt, and through experience with clients, that the client still wanted that face-to-face. They didn't want to move to a digital platform. And that's where it became really important for us to say, you know what, we're going to meet the client how they want to be met. So if you have a client who wants to meet face-to-face and doesn't want to use the digital platform, that's okay. We have multiple channels of how we're going to engage with that client. And what that did for our team members is it immediately allowed them to relax. They didn't feel like they were going to have to force a client to use a digital platform or use a piece of technology to engage with us. So if they had a client that came in that was of a certain demographic and they were really just used to sitting across a desk and talking it through, they could still do that and still be meeting that client's needs, still be living our values, fulfilling our purpose, meeting our strategic direction. So that was a big one for team members. The other one was a digital first approach, not digital only, but digital first. And again, it just allowed team members to say, okay, if I'm looking at creating a process or refining a process, have I considered automation? Have I considered a digital solution? And sometimes the digital solution, even when considered, just financially didn't make sense, or it didn't fit with the workflow, or it just wouldn't have been the appropriate choice, but at least it was considered. And it's just, again, changing that mindset of how do you use these behaviors to make it really clear? We're not a digital only, we're a digital first. So don't worry, we're not trying to move everything to the digital world, but we need to know that we've considered it. So those are a couple of other examples from that client perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And I also really love how your values have enabled you to have those conversations because employees, I always believe that employees want to do well and employees want to serve the client well. And so sometimes though they can feel a little, like you mentioned, that they don't have the option to serve them how the client wants to. Yes. And so, really trying to balance those perspectives of how can we say, efficiencies and savings and automations need to be considered and to be cost effective and still meeting preferences as best we can. And so I think that's really a great example of how you can use your values in really practical ways. Sometimes values get a bad rap of abstract, not really applicable. And so these are really tangible ways that have impacted work and how employees serve the clients. I have a couple of other questions. You mentioned earlier about talking through when you were defining the behaviors that went along with your values and also where there's gaps. And I think that was really insightful and a really courageous way to look at them, of being honest about maybe behaviors that your organization is strong in and behaviors that maybe haven't been common or haven't been taught. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So when we were moving into this work, it was pretty clear to us that oftentimes, and it was that what I'm going to say courageous conversations, we found that team members they hadn't developed the skill to successfully have those courageous conversations in a way that allowed the relationship to remain intact to where as a group you could still move forward and you were doing what was best for the business. It often became where you would see avoidance or you would just find that teams try to do their work in isolation because they didn't want to have to deal with other teams, or they didn't want to have to maybe be told that this wasn't the right way or the best way. And so collaboration was another thing that we had to work on. But what I appreciated, it was actually through the focus groups that we were able to gather data on which of these behaviors do you think we're going to struggle with the most? Let's explore why we think we're going to struggle with them. And then are there techniques and mechanisms that we can use and put in place ahead of time to alleviate some of that so that they won't be so hard, or that we can recognize when we're not living those behaviors, and what are the mechanisms and the exercises that we can pull in to correct that so that we're all kind of headed in the same direction. And I think that was key, because we got some really great insights from our team members of, here's been my lived experience, and I think we're really going to struggle with implementing this behavior. But here are some things I think if we could just tweak them a bit, or if we could have these things, mechanisms in place, we'll do so much better. And so we've tried to do that throughout. We're constantly collecting, we collect 3 times a year through engagement surveys from our team members, what's working, and the common theme is culture. We have a common set of questions that we ask related to our culture, and we give team members an opportunity to tell us what's working, what isn't working, where can we improve, which ones are we still struggling with. And we've created a lot of really cool resources in rolling out our values. One of them, I'm so proud of the team. They created a Jeopardy game. So they took our values and our behaviors, and they took real life AFSC scenarios and situations that have happened in our organization, and they mapped them out to the answer is always a value or a behavior. And then they've got the scenario that they can talk through, and we use it to roll it out to new team members, existing team members, long tenured team members. Anytime teams get together, they can use this Jeopardy game and just talk through these different scenarios and how we could, exhibit the proper behavior related to our values, and how we may have exhibited an improper behavior or not what we were intending, and then work through it. So it's just a way to kind of deepen that learning.
Fun and applicable.
Yes.
Okay.
And competitive. We're a little bit competitive.
Okay. That's a good combo. That's a really good combo.
It has been a great experience for our organization, and it was a lot of work, and it took a lot longer, but I think that purposeful, thoughtful length of time to collect the data, to have those necessary conversations, to work with focus groups and make sure that we had it right before we rolled it out was key. And I cannot enforce the importance of leadership through this whole process, and that tone from the top, being able to have Daryl, this is his vision of what he wanted to see in our organization, and then have that filtered through. And we talk about it in every divisional meeting. Our values we are living them, and we're talking about them all the time. They're not just written on a piece of paper and put on a wall somewhere.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And as you were talking, that's what's going to be my question, was advice that you'd give other organizations, because sometimes organizations, either they have the generic, values that never get referenced, or sometimes they do try to do it really quick, that, it's just in a matter of a one-day workshop or something, that they come up with some new ones and then that's it. But I think you really took such a methodical, thoughtful, staged approach to get them to really be rooted in what strategy are we working towards, and what behaviors do we need to see to realize that strategy, and then how can that be practical and part of our everyday work. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really incredible and such a fantastic example, and one where it shows the power of culture to live out your organization's strategy. So that's amazing. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. Yes, go ahead.
I think Allison would have shared with you too, when you first met her, our values and action cards that we have.
Yes.
And I think it's probably one of the reasons we've been so successful, is it has our value and our statement. Then it has, for each behavior, it actually outlines, here's what it means and here's what it does not mean. So we've provided a bit of context of both, of this was what it was intended to mean, but this is also what we don't want it, because you can overuse a value and it becomes a negative. And I think that's the other piece that we spent some time really figuring out, when would it become an anti-value? And that's really defining that. Here's what it isn't, because sometimes you can have individuals who weaponize your values and your behaviors, and it has the opposite effect. So that was really crucial as well, because it gives leaders and team members the opportunity to say, no, you're exhibiting a behavior. Yes, you're saying it is what we want it to be,
in
but
the spirit
you're missing the context, and here's what it isn't.
Right. So yes, exactly. And occasionally that can really happen where either an individual or a group can take it too far so that it's now gone off track. And I think that's brilliant in terms of, and I do something really similar in Brene Brown's Dare to Lead program. I've gone through the same thing of here's what this looks like and here's what this doesn't look like.
Right. Yeah.
And really getting clear about the nuance, because I think it's not black and white. When we're talking about people,
no,
there's no clear-cut answers, but we need to dig into that gray area in the middle of this is what we're looking for, this is what's acceptable and really encouraged in our workplace, and here's what, no, that's not what we mean. And it's too far, and that can be used kind of in the wrong spirit.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's really helpful. And those cards are beautiful.
I know.
And they're beautiful and very helpful in providing that direction and that consistency for everyone of what culture looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
And,
yes.
And I think it was really important, like the team, they really leaned into how do we make this meaningful for everyone across the organization? What are those visuals we can use? What are those usable tangible resources we can give leaders, we can give team members, just so that it is top of mind. This is a sustainable program. It's not a rollout and then that's it, we're done and we'll never speak about it again. It's how do we embed it into what we do so that as a team member, from the minute you think about coming to work for AFSC and your whole career here, you can feel it, you can sense it, you know what our values are, you know what those behaviors look like because you're experiencing them. That was really important for us.
Yes, exactly. And then that they feel it and sense it. And culture is often the way you feel out. But this gives some more tangible to it. So it's teachable. So then it's teachable. Yes, that's great. It's wonderful. Okay, well, I could talk to you all day on this.
I could obviously too. So
yes, exactly. Well, I'm so grateful for your time and just giving us a little bit about the journey that AFSC has, Daryl's vision for strategy and for the organization and for the ag industry in Alberta, and then really bringing it to life through your culture. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom and expertise. So thank you so much for being on with us today. Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of Strategy and Culture Conversations. If you found our discussion valuable, be sure to leave a review to grow our community and sign up for our newsletter at strategyandculture.ca to stay in the loop. Cheers to courageous leadership. I'll see you next time.